We gather to celebrate a very important feast of St. Peter and St. Paul. These two towering figures of the early church were martyrs, but they were also more than that. They are the foundations of our faith. Together, they represent two different dimensions of our Christian faith. Peter, the man of faith and leadership, and Paul, the man of teaching and mission. Peter, faith and leadership, Paul, teaching and mission. And the church, in its love and wisdom, gives us readings today that are more than historical reminders or stories about Peter and Paul. They are invitations to grow, invitations to look deeply into the lives of these two great men. Peter and Paul, though very different in personality and background, reflect the faith we are called to profess and the teachings we are called to live and share. Peter, we know him well from the Gospels. He was a fisherman and a man who sometimes was impulsive, sometimes afraid, but always close to Jesus. What makes Peter stand out is at the crucial moment when Jesus asks him, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter responds, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." This is what we are called to profess as well. And it's the foundation of Peter's leadership in the church. Not because he was the smartest or the bravest, but because he recognized the truth through the faith. Jesus tells him, "Flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven." In other words, Peter knew this truth not by his human understanding or reason, but because he opened his heart to the divine mysteries. This is very important. God is not fully comprehensible to reason alone. However, faith is not irrational, but it reaches beyond rationality. Peter teaches us that to truly know Jesus, if we really want to know Jesus, we must be open to the faith, to the gift of faith, which often surpasses what we can see and explain. Even so, Peter struggled. He denied Jesus 3 times before he was crucified. He was afraid, but Jesus did not abandon him. He never abandons us when we are afraid. After the resurrection, Jesus gently restored him by asking him 3 times, "Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me? Peter, do you love me?" And Peter became the first shepherd of the church, our first pope. Paul, on the other hand, perhaps the most unlikely disciple, he was a Pharisee, a zealous for the law, confident in his own righteousness. And at first, he was a persecutor of the Christians. But God had other plans. On the road to Damascus, Paul was blinded, not just physically, but spiritually. And when his eyes were opened, he realized that everything he has once prided himself in, his knowledge, his discipline, his status, meant nothing compared to knowing Christ. Sometimes I feel like when they talk about Peter and Paul, I feel very identified myself. Paul's life became a living testimony to the power of grace. Though he was a scholar and a teacher, he continually reminded others that his wisdom came from God, not himself. He preached with passion and boldness, but never with pride or arrogance. He wrote, "I will boast all the more gladly for my weakness, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." These two men, one faith. Peter and Paul, so different, yet united in one mission, in our mission as well, to make Christ known. Peter teaches us to confess the faith boldly, to stand on the truth that Jesus is the Son of the living God, that he is still with us in the Eucharist. Paul teaches us to live and share our faith with humility and clarity, always rooted in the grace of God. Both men gave their lives in martyrdom. Peter crucified upside down, and Paul beheaded. And the witnesses continue to shape the church to this very day. I find it interesting with Bishop Barron, who was speaking about this gospel, how he mentions that Rome, he was visiting Rome for the conclave, and there's ruins of the Roman Empire. And it was just so impactful to him to see the St. Peter's Basilica still standing, right? How if you were in Rome in the year when Peter was crucified, you would have never thought that 2,000 years later, it was the church that was given to him by Christ still standing versus the ruins that we see now in Rome of the empire. And I thought that was very impactful. So what can we learn from them today? First, we must seek Jesus personally. Faith is just not a tradition we inherit. They're not just rituals we do. It's a relationship we build. Like Peter, we must ask ourselves, who is Jesus to me? And we usually responded with our creed every Sunday. We can say with the heart and soul, you are Christ, you are the Son of the living God. Second, we must be ready to teach the faith, not just with our words, but with our lives. Like Paul, we should study, pray, grow, and go to the sacraments, but never forget that all good things come from God. Our success, our wisdom, our service, these are the gifts to be shared and not the achievements to be claimed. Finally, we must remember that God works with imperfect people. Believe me, I know very well. Perfect denied Jesus. Paul persecuted his followers. Yet through grace, through the relationship with Christ, they became saints. You too can also become one. As we reflect on the lives of St. Peter and St. Paul, we recall that their journey of faith is marked by courage, transformation, willing to sacrifice, and it leads us to the very heart of the church, the Eucharist. Both Peter and Paul ultimately gave their lives for Christ as a sacrifice, just as Jesus gave his for us. And here in this altar, we are united with that same sacrifice. In the Mass, we do not merely remember Jesus, we enter into his life, just like Peter and Paul. And just like them, we bring our sufferings and our happiness too. We're not just sad people suffering, we're happy people because Jesus converts the suffering into glory. This is the mystery of our faith. Peter, who proclaimed, "You are the Christ," now points us to Christ truly present in the body and blood of this altar. And Paul, who declared it, "It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me," now reminds us that it is Christ who nourishes us, who gives us life and sends us forth. So as we receive the Eucharist today, let us ask for the graces we saw in Peter and Paul, the faith to know Christ and to proclaim him with our lives, the humility to depend entirely on God's strength, not just our own, and the love to offer ourselves like them as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. May this Eucharist deepen our communion and relationship with Jesus and with each other as it did for them. St. Peter and St. Paul, pray for us.